Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Courage to Change, a recovery podcast. My name is Ashley Lowe Blassingame, and I am an alcoholic and your host. I am so excited to announce my guest, Kerry Andre, today. Kerry grew up in a rural farming town of Williston, North Dakota. With alcoholism and her father's opiate use running rampant in her family, Kerry's exposure to addiction started very, very young. After a series of traumatic events, she turned to alcohol to numb her pain and found herself in a downward spiral that lasted over a decade. 3 kids, numerous broken relationships, and 4 DUIs later, Kerry finally got the help she needed to start on her recovery journey, and she just so happened to find it with Lionrock Recovery. She is now living a life in sobriety that she is super proud of and has the love and support of an incredible partner. She just celebrated 4 years clean and sober. This is a really amazing story, and I can't wait for you guys to hear it. Kerry is an inspirational woman who has been through quite a lot. And if you grew up in a rural town in America, this story will probably very much resonate with you. So, episode 44, let's do this.
Actually had a squatter in our house. The people that were selling the house, their adult son, he was like 50 years old. He refused to leave. He's got kind of a sordid past and, in trouble with drugs and things like that. And he had nowhere to go. Like he actually moved out into his car, but we had to go through the eviction process. So my offer was cash. So we were supposed to be able to like move in or close. And then I had a lease on an apartment that was supposed to be 2 months. So I thought we were going to be doing the remodel during that time. But we had to go through the whole court process and get the eviction for this son who had no lease, who was paying no rent. His parents were in their 80s. It was just this crazy situation.
There's squatters' rights, right? That's a thing.
Yeah. Yep. And because his parents let him stay with them, technically, since I think it was it's either a 24 or 48 hour window, he was just basically considered a resident. Even with no lease, none of that. So they had to go through the court process. And he squatted till the very end. Like it was 30 days to get it through court. Then they kicked him out. Then they gave him a week to get out. And like, it was still 5 days later. And so we had to keep pushing back the closing, and it was a cash offer. And so we thought, just boom, we'd be able to get in, remodel, do everything, not have to worry about it. And these poor people in their 80s dealing with a son with addiction issues, and which like I understand. So I'm like empathizing with the poor guy. Like he's got nowhere to go. It's the middle of winter. It's 40 below.
Oh my gosh. What a nightmare.
It was. So needless to say, when we moved in, we had terminated our lease and didn't want to have to re-sign or be paying month to month or be paying double. And so we had to remodel while moving in with the 3 kids. And so, because of all that time spent in the eviction process. So yeah, it's been an interesting year.
So you're using all of your coping skills, basically.
Well, yeah. And my kids just happen to be like me. I keep, just going with the whole payback thing that, your parents always say that you're going to have paybacks when you have your own children. Well, mine are 4, 7, and 8, and I'm hoping that's not my 19, the equivalent of my 19. Or I'm hoping it is, I guess, because 19 was like when I went like, nope, enough with you parents, I'm not listening. Well, my kids have been doing that since I think they came out.
Yeah. Yeah, mine too. Oh my gosh. Well, that's crazy. Well, I'm glad that you guys you're in the house now. No squatters.
No. Interesting things though, because we knew that he had issues, and it's like we were trying to find this water line because we moved the fridge. And so we wanted the water line to hook up to the ice and the water in the fridge. And it's like, so we're under the staircase or whatever. And I'm telling Michael, oh my gosh, there is a death list down here. And I start reading off names because I'm underneath the stairwell in this like little space that I can barely fit in. And he's like, what? I'm like, gosh, we should get the old annuals from that guy's, like when he graduated, because he's been in this town his whole life. I'm like, make sure everybody's okay. And so I crawl out or whatever, and Michael's just kind of looking at me, not taking it seriously. And so he crawls under to see if he can find the water line. And he's like, oh my gosh, you were serious. It's a death list. I'm like, yes, it says death list.
Okay. I was like, how did you know it was a death list?
No, it says death list right underneath there. And it's like this little hole that you have to climb through. Like, and it has all these names listed. I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy is so scary.
So you weren't on there though. So that's good.
No, you could tell that it was, like a younger person's writing. It was kind of like scratched on there. But the worst part is we're right across the street from the public library. So when he moved out into his car, he literally moved across the street where he could sit in his car with his laptop and I suppose get Wi-Fi from the public library. And so we just watched him to make sure, like, okay, he's still there. Oh, he moved 2 spots and, watched our cameras and changed all the locks and stuff. Cause he didn't for a good 8 months. I mean, that was his place. They must've finally told him to move on, like find a new place to park.
Yeah.
But yeah. It was just like right there.
So when you went in there, was he like, how did you find him in there or how did that work?
No, we had the sheriffs and his parents take care of it. We didn't sign any papers until they came over. And then we had our locksmith come over and change the locks because, and just waited a few days before we went over and had cameras installed just in case, taking precautions because you just never know. So always interesting stories.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. And of course, it's so hard when you're in situations like that where you're in recovery and you see someone struggling with addiction, alcoholism, and you have compassion for their situation, but also now they're pissing you off.
Right?
So you're trying to be like, I have compassion for my fellow man, but also, could you please stop squatting in my house?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, and to his parents, it's just like, oh my gosh, like to be in your 80s, retired, and
I can't even imagine
having to draw that line. Like they weren't letting him into their new house. Considering the situation, they were drawing their line. But I mean, an adult son at 50 years old, eventually you would have to. And so for them too, I mean, just heartbreaking.
Oh, and so how long ago was that?
That was just a year ago.
Okay.
So yeah, that was our house situation. So now we're just getting settled and kind of clearing the dust. And we knew remodeling would take quite a while anyway, because the housing situation where I live in Williston, North Dakota, it's so overly inflated. So your options are like buying new for prices that just seem outrageous, or buying something that's a little bit older and having to probably put some work into it. And that's what we chose to do, because then we could get all the things we wanted, but like our house was built in 1977. So this is a couple steps up.
Yeah. Are you from North Dakota?
Yeah, I'm from Williston, North Dakota. I've been here all my life. I grew up here. And then I went to different places for college and just kind of for fun, and moved around. And Minneapolis, of course, doing the normal thing, follow the boyfriend to Omaha, Nebraska, of all places, and Anchorage, Alaska. And
Ooh, was he a fisherman?
No, he wasn't. He had family up there. So yeah, just all sorts of different things. Went and lived with my sister when she was going to college, and worked at a sign shop in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is my current career right now. I do graphic design and work with vinyl and produce signage. So I went down there and kind of did almost an internship with Fast Signs down there. And then, but just kind of kept coming back to Williston. And luckily, I had bought a house right out of high school when the housing market was very, very low. So I got a really big house, and I got it at a good price before everything inflated, because the oil boom is here in Williston. The oil boom that, is national headlines and stuff. We're kind of the epicenter of it. So all that oil that's coming from the United States that's not in Texas or Pennsylvania is here in Williston. So yeah, I kind of got lucky because I didn't have to deal with the extreme rent prices or housing prices when I came back to Williston. But, the ability to make money here and make a living is just above what the median average of, I would say, the United States is. I mean, some truck drivers, I guess what they would say is, even if you just have a CDL, you can be making $120,000 a year just for driving truck or doing other things in the oil field. So I'm in a different part because I do the signage industry, but with all the businesses coming into town, I stay very busy. So.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And so where did you go to college?
I went to college in Fargo, North Dakota for a year. And then I actually, after that, went to Denver, Colorado for a year.
Cool.
Didn't do much college. I was enrolled in college, but I decided that I wanted to go and teach skiing and snowboarding.
Yeah.
So I was kind of on permanent spring break up there, teaching little kids how to ski and snowboard. And
love that. And how long are you clean and sober now?
Oh, geez. So it would have been 4 years on January 5th, I think is the day. So 2016.
Awesome. I'm the 7th.
Yes. Christiana said that birthday week buddies.
Yeah, exactly. It's right after New Year's. Everything's feeling real crappy and time to get sober. So you grew up in an oil town. Did your dad or mom work in the oil fields?
Yeah, my dad's family grew up farming. That's the other industry that's really big in town. It's rural North Dakota. Growing up, the city Williston that I'm nearest to, or town, I'm not sure. It was probably 10, 12,000. But we lived on a farm north of town. We didn't do farming like my grandparents did on my father's side, but we had like the old McDonald type farm. We, goats, chickens,
right.
All those, everything in the song. And after my dad got out of high school, he went straight into the oil field. And it was boom and bust for a lot of years. So it was really good times where people were making good money and comfortable, and really bad times. But we didn't know that growing up, my sisters and I. And my mom was doing sign painting with her dad, my grandpa. And so that industry that I'm in now came from that side of the family, although it's digital age now.
Yeah. So what is your birth order with your sisters?
I am the oldest of 3 girls. We are actually boom, 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 right in a row. Me and my middle sister are 15 months apart. And then my middle sister and my little sister are 10 months apart.
Oh my gosh.
My mom says because of the oil field, my dad was constantly traveling. During the 80s, it was kind of a slower time. She said it was the only 3 times he was home in the 80s. Would be us 3.
Yeah.
So,
oh my gosh. Oh, wow. So that is your mother is a hero. And that's coming from a twin mom. Mm-hmm. That's a lot pregnancy.
Yes. My sister's pregnant with twins right now. So
wow. When are they due?
They are due in August. So we're thinking sometime in July.
Yeah. Awesome. So the farm you grew up on the farm. It was your dad's farm, but he also worked in the oil fields. Like the farm it didn't make money for you guys.
No, that wasn't the primary source of income. It's just kind of where we lived out in the country. We went to country school, actually. It's so rural. There was country schools. What is a country school? A country school, like, you hear about the one-room schoolhouses on the prairie. That's kind of what it was. The first school that I went to actually looked like that. And I think there was maybe 4 rooms in it, 4 teachers. And it was grades 1 through 8. And by second grade, they got a newer one that was actually close to our house. So we jumped on the bus for about 3 minutes. The bus brought us to school and then brought us home afterwards. And that was grades 1 through 8. And they were combined classrooms, grades 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, all the way up. So schooling, really small community of friends, family, and stuff like that, mostly, rural.
Okay.
Families. So,
and was it a happy existence?
It was a happy existence. We had really good teachers, very close friends. Town was only 8 miles away technically. So we were in town a lot of the times. We had relatives that lived in town. My mom had really good friends that lived in town. Both sides of our family, my dad's side and my mom's side, they came from very big families. So we had aunts and uncles and cousins. And so all of the holidays and everything like that. And we all went to school together because we were fairly rural. And, we just grew up with this big, huge family.
That's awesome. Well, it sounds awesome. I don't know if it was awesome, but it sounds really cool. Were there examples of alcoholism in this family at all? Are you the only person?
No, I'm definitely not the only person. We grew up around alcohol and it was absolutely, completely normalized. The thing that I'm realizing as I've grown into adulthood, been other places in the world, in the country and things like that, And I actually had a counselor tell me this once too. And she grew up here in this rural farming oil field community. And it's almost that the standard of normal drinking is, so much higher than it is elsewhere. You start reading so technical definitions of alcohol abuse and things like that, any more than 2 drinks a day, for consecutive days, all those things, labels that they put on what's good and what's bad. Our bar was set so much higher. I mean, it wasn't unusual to see any of the family members bringing a case of beer each to a family gathering. What they would drink, I don't know, because we were little and stuff like that. But I remember looking back, my first instance of realizing that my dad had a problem, which he's an alcoholic and a drug addict, has been his whole life, self-admittedly. He said, the first drink that he ever took, he knew instantly that he was different. And growing up, I don't feel like we saw a whole lot of that from my dad. He was constantly gone and my mom hid it from us. I mean, that was her job. Was to take care of us and hide his addiction. And so now we know as adults, and they since got divorced and things like that. And it was addiction that broke them apart. But going back to my first instance of really realizing that it was a problem for some people drinking, I remember my dad coming home and my parents yelling and my dad just basically collapsing on the floor like Indian style and me sitting on his lap. And he was just different. And I didn't know why. And my mom was mad and sad and crying and maybe 5 or 6 years old and just sitting on his lap. And he was just talking to me and just saying, it's just like Kool-Aid. You can't just have one glass. It's just like Kool-Aid. And I'm so confused because my mom is upset and my dad is just like, la-di-da,
right.
Just drunk and, realizing he's just trying to tell me, a cautionary tale, even at that young.
Right. Did you have feelings about Kool-Aid after that?
I didn't have feelings about Kool-Aid after that. I have a lot of memories where there were incidents that I have blocked out. I've remembered them after my sisters and I have started going to therapy and stuff like that. And we'll talk about stories. And, my sister Bryn has forgotten this story. My sister Lindy has forgotten this story. And we remind each other, or, the same with me. They're like, Kerry, you don't remember that? And I'm like, oh yeah, I do remember that. So I feel like that story specifically, I don't remember when I actually came back and I made the connection, but I just can vividly remember it in my head, the way my parents looked. So yeah, I definitely grew up in an alcoholic family, and being the oldest, I going through different treatments and therapies and things like that, and trying to figure out why I feel the way I feel about certain things. I just, I've remembered a lot more of a few instances where, it wasn't such a happy life. But for the most part, yeah, my parents just tried to make our childhood the best it was. My dad was a great father, and my mom she would never dispute that. Like his love, his work ethic, everything like that was amazing. I mean, it was very old school. It was his job to take care of us, even though my mom worked and stuff like that. But she raised us kids. I mean, she tells stories about he would get off of a 30, 40-hour job where he was up for hours and hours and hours. And he could just walk in the house and could tell that she was just at her wit's end, with kids that age. And he'd just be like, go. And he'd stay up for, another 10 hours so that she could just have a break because he'd been gone.
Yeah.
So
what did your dad's alcoholism look like when he was around? Like was he happy, fun? What was it like growing up in an alcohol? Like, what were the characteristics that made your house, aside from the drinking, the alcoholic home?
Since my mom hid a lot of it, the drinking was a problem. He had a drinking problem. He is an alcoholic and he can't handle it to this day. But being sober from alcohol, once us girls got older and, we realized, what being drunk was and all of those things, we just always knew that he didn't drink, probably for a good 12 to 15 years out of our life. But we didn't know the other side of it. He was an opiate addict and he had a lot of injuries. He was in a really bad car accident back in the 70s, 80s. The cure for that was, just opiates, painkillers and stuff like that. And that's where he found his drug of choice, which would be opiates. And it still is to this day. So when we got into junior high and high school is when kind of the jig was up. My mom kind of quit hiding it and quit acting like, oh, we have the perfect life. We have the perfect family. And well, she had to. I mean, she had kicked him out. He'd gotten sober. Then she let him back in. But then with the opiates, they were easier to hide. And then she'd find out he was still doing them. And it was only, even, I guess I shouldn't say he was sober for, 12 to 15 years. He was sober for most of that time. He probably drank once or twice a year, but it was always awful. It was stories of he'd come home with a wrecked truck, and it was, oh, 2 deer ran into my truck at the same time simultaneously. And it's like, yeah, no. Nice try, but we don't believe you. So
that's an interesting point I want to stop on. So I hear a lot of the time from people like, I don't drink very often, but when I do, trouble finds me, right? Like I cannot drink for a year, but when I do drink, I get in trouble. And, is that alcoholism? And, I always talk about like, well, you have an alcohol problem if alcohol causes you problems. That's pretty straightforward, right? But that's a really interesting point that you make, that every time it happened, but it was only a couple times a year. So that probably made it easier for him to justify, because there was distance between one, problem and another.
Yes, for sure. Well, and then as family members being close, you empathize with the person that's feeling bad about themselves because they know that they did something wrong and they love you, and you just get caught up in that cycle. And it's not that we had an abusive childhood, but the cycle itself can just be abusive, and it's not even meant to be, but
right.
It is.
Right. Because it's just emotionally such a roller coaster.
Yes. And that's probably the right word for it, is a roller coaster. We kind of, after my dad's first treatment that we were aware of, which was grade school, it did kind of feel like a roller coaster after that. It was just waiting for the ball to drop, waiting for the next time. And for some reason, my dad it seemed like he couldn't handle the pressure of certain things. And it just didn't make sense, whether it was he had to go to a basketball tournament that one of us were in, and he was going out of town and he knew he was going to be by himself, but he ended up drunk in a bar fight. And it was always a word like holidays and stuff like that. The pressure of something, anything, just would have him on a tear. So it was a roller coaster of like, oh, is this going to get ruined? Oh, Pierre's not here yet. So where is he? Is something wrong? And so we lived a little bit in fear once we realized that my dad had a problem. One thing my mom was really good at, despite their relationship now, is all throughout our childhood, when we found out about his addictions, she did say he was sick. She was angry, she was disappointed, but it was always taught to us that he was sick. And now, knowing what I know and going through what I went through, it's just something that I hold on to, I guess, and really advocate for people to learn more about what addiction and alcoholism is and what it involves, because a lot of people just think that it's purely just a choice, and people are making bad choices and that makes them bad people, or, all the different, stigmas attached to it. So yeah, I'm glad that my mom always had that for us, despite what she was going through.
What was her relationship with drugs and alcohol like?
So drugs were never a thing for her. She hated smoking pot. I mean, we were very open when we were going into high school and college age. She would talk to us about it because she didn't have a problem with it. And I think she wanted us to be prepared. And, she was very honest, admitting in high school or college, she had tried different things and she just hated it, and the reasons why she hated it. And drinking, she always drank. Both sides of our family did. Her brother was a very bad alcoholic. He almost died. And my grandpa actually owned a liquor store when they were growing up. And my grandparents always had a Bud Light every night. happy hour or whatever. I think my grandpa would maybe have 2 max, and my grandma's in the nursing home. She has Alzheimer's really bad, but we still bring her a beer up every night. Somebody goes up and brings her a beer. And, but it was never anything more than that, except for my uncle that we knew of. My mom always drank. Her friends always drank. It was always a part of our family gatherings. And it was a part of my dad's side too. But as far as we knew with my mom, she didn't have a problem. She wasn't an alcoholic. It really was all to my dad. My dad was the alcoholic. My dad was the problem because he always caused problems when he drank.
Right, right. And did you want to get out of the house? Or, were you like, oh, when I get out of here? Or did you have dreams of the big city? Or, what did you, when you thought about growing up, what were the things that you thought?
Yeah, I did. I graduated early from high school. When I was finishing my junior year, I realized that I only needed, for state standards, 1 more class to, it was actually half a credit to graduate early. And then we had a small community college in our town. So at 16, I took that half a credit, got my high school diploma, and then went a full year of college while I was taking my technical senior year at my high school. Got a full ride scholarship there because then I was a year ahead, but I still got to walk across the stage with my class.
Right.
So when I graduated from my high school, I also graduated, I finished my freshman year of college, and I was out. And I was out before the senior year even finished. I didn't drink all through high school. I probably had my first taste of alcohol at 15, 16. I think my boyfriend at the time, he was, of course, had the boyfriend all through high school. We were going to get married. We were going to do the things. We were going to live the life. And he was well aware of alcoholism. And I think he's been off and on in recovery, actually, since we don't have a relationship now, but I've heard and stuff like that. So, but we got busted basically our first time, me feeling drunk off of like 2 wine coolers, the gross, icky wine coolers. But it's just like, oh, okay, so I'm not going to do that, but I still want to go with my friends. And so I think I even had the nickname Gatorade Girl because I was always driving. I was always at all the parties. I was never drinking. And so I was the safety net for everybody. And it never bothered me. But then senior year, it was like, okay, well, I've technically graduated high school, graduated early. School was never hard. And so those last few months of senior year, it went from 0 to 100 miles an hour, and small
what do you
town
think changed? What have you gone back? Like, did something happen? Were you just anticipatory? What do you think changed in that time?
Well, in that time, I think it was just, I had put so much stress on doing the right thing. I had always done the right thing, got good grades, done with sports, did what my parents wanted me to, always listened, didn't really break curfew. And it was just like, okay, now it's my turn to have fun with my friends. And we had older friends too. And so it was just like, oh, now we're all going to college and we're all splitting up. So it was all summer long and all the way to college. And at that point, it was just, I was putting my foot down. The summer before I left for college, so I would have been 17. I don't even know if there was a night that I can remember that we didn't drink. And it was keg parties and 30 packs piled as high as the ceiling. And yeah, it's what we did. And we did it with everything. It's like going to the lake. Okay, fill up the cooler and booze cruising. It's crazy. I was telling my cousin's wife, she grew up in Alaska, in Sitka on a small island. And my cousin and I were talking one night at dinner about like booze cruising and going out to the lake and bonfires and drinking and driving and things like that. And I'm still astonished that it's so shocking because to us it was so normal. But she's like, I have to stop you guys. You guys are just making me nervous. And I can see you. You're sitting right here, right in front of me. You're fine. But like, do you guys realize this is not normal? Like, people don't grow up doing those kind of things. And we're like, but everybody did. We grabbed a case of beer and all of our friends and we drank till we couldn't see and we drove home.
Right.
And it is insane now thinking back about it, all the different times that we could have been hurt, injured, but it was absolutely the normal thing to do here. It was, just the way that people had fun.
Do you think that I dated a guy who grew up in a small town, and his story, in Massachusetts, and his stories are the same. It was kind of a rural town. And I wonder how much of rural America this is the story for the teenage, growing up experience. And do you have perspective on that? Like, do you think, was there anyone where it could have been any different to have, like, other than someone who just sat at home? I mean, was there anything else to do?
No, there wasn't a lot to do. And I think too, when you say dreams about getting out and doing other things, a lot of us all did go to bigger schools. But it's funny because a lot of us just went in groups and then we didn't branch out. And my specific friend group, a few years younger, a few years older, we all seem to have had the same experience with high school and college. But yeah, I mean, it really was the thing to do, and dragging Maine and all of those things. My parents tell stories about doing the same things that we did when we were in high school, when they were in high school. And a counselor did tell me that it is very common, higher instances of alcoholism and stuff in the rural communities. The counselor I was speaking of that was from here and stuff. And she said, no, it isn't abnormal for this type of community, but it is abnormal, elsewhere. And so, but we didn't have a lot of other options than, say clubs, or, we had the bowling alley, but we always got drunk before we went to the bowling alley. We would sneak beer into the movie theater, and it probably wasn't everybody, but most of the friend groups that I hung around with were. And I wasn't stuck with just some like outside friend group. I was in sports, so I was friends with the people that did sports. There was the potheads. That was a group, of course, in high school, and I was friends with those people. And then there was the partiers, and it was just, everybody was kind of friends because we were a small enough town. So, but I don't remember people not doing it. I remember I didn't do it, but I probably also wasn't paying attention.
Right.
So.
Right. And what did you think an alcoholic was?
Oh, well, the only example I really had was, I had two examples. My uncle, and we'd heard stories about him, and he just drank so much alcohol that he almost died. So then he quit. No really reasonings necessarily why. So it was just, he's an alcoholic. And then there was my dad, who he wasn't that bad in my eyes, probably growing up, because it was intermittent. It was, maybe once a year where it'd be a big blowout. But it definitely, alcoholism wasn't how much you drank. For me, it was what happened when you drank. And
which is unusual. Usually people associate it the other way around.
Yeah, no, not for us. None of us kids were alcoholics or going down that path, even though, we had week-long parties where we had to have 15 kegs that whole week between not a big group of us either.
Right. So then you go off to college and, have a whole different, you go off to a couple colleges, have a whole different experience. When do things start to kind of take a turn for you, or how did you go from that normal kind of what everyone else was doing to, this is weird, like this isn't normal, or maybe this is problematic?
I probably didn't until I was about 26. I went off to college and we continued to drink that way. Everywhere I went to college, except for Colorado, I had friends. And so we just did the same thing. And I didn't go very far with school. Almost a straight A student and all the way through high school. And I just gave it up to party and be with my friends. That's all I really cared about, was just doing my own thing, really not doing anything. And I ended up moving back to Williston after my first year of college and had completely failed out. Just not because I wasn't smart enough to make it, but because I didn't go. Our house was party central. I didn't live in the dorms. I was paying for it myself. So, which in hindsight, it's like, I would think if I'm paying that much money that I would have wanted to make it worth my while, but no, I didn't. And I came back and I moved in with a friend from high school who was about a year younger than me. And we continued to party. And then somehow at one party, cocaine got introduced. And so that was probably a week-long experience off and on of partying and cocaine being around. And then some of the friends, once all the cocaine ran out, continued. And then meth came into the picture. And little did I know that it had been going on, and through, I think, my apartment and the next door neighbors, that they were all doing meth, dealing meth, things like that. Well, I come home one drunk night and make friends with my friends, and all of a sudden they're accepting that, oh, you can do a little meth too. You know,
this is in Williston.
Yeah. They'd been so nicely hiding it from me because I was only a drinker and they didn't want to get me in trouble. And
Right.
Yeah. So the next 3-4 months of that was experimentation with that life, with a whole different group of people, and isolation with that group of people, because, you know, to me, that was just such a bad drug. You know, that was just horrible, but it was fun, and we were having fun doing it. And I didn't really realize, you know, on the food chain, I guess they were on the high end of the food chain. Not the best people to just like jump in with. Like, if you're going to get in trouble right away, that's where I would have done it. And it could have easily ended up in probably prison had I stayed in that. But my parents figured out what we were doing. And so they said, we're either going to commit you, or you can go to treatment on your own. Because
after 4 months, they wanted you to go to, you were bad enough that you had to go to treatment?
Well,
they felt that you were.
Yeah. They didn't have any experience, I don't think, with those type of drugs. You know, things were still really differentiated between alcohol is not really a bad thing because that's legal. Everybody does it. You know, they'd experimented with cocaine in college, but that's just something you do every once in a while, you know. But meth and the, you know, crackheads per se in town, you know, are those scary people that don't have teeth and, you know, steal things, and it's the dirty drug. And so they were just scared that, you know, and they'd heard all the stuff probably at that point where it was, you know, the ads about meth, even once is too much and you're addicted.
Right.
So, and I was completely opposite of what I used to be, at least drinking alcohol. And being in college, it was like, oh, okay, the kids are going out, they're in college, they're having drinks, that's normal. But doing meth was something completely different. And so it was get off of this and do it now. And so I said, okay, you know, I'll go. I mean, not with a lot of protests. I mean, my mom, I was so awful to her back then. It was like anything that ever had bothered me in my life, I took it out on her. I mean, I was a raging capital B word from hell.
Yeah. I mean, also meth doesn't exactly make you the nicest person on the planet. My experience, at least. It doesn't help anger towards mom.
No, it didn't. And I just wanted to be an adult. You know, it was my life. I have my own apartment. I can do what I want. I don't have to go to college. You know, just the child temper tantrum that I can look back and see now. And so, and even my dad, you know, he just had said, you know, I've been down these roads with drugs, and he had done everything in his lifetime. And so I went and got sober for 2 weeks. And, you know, when I was telling my story in treatment there, I didn't have any withdrawal symptoms, really, nothing physically that was going on with me. But I was 19 at the time and hadn't done it very often. It was just intermittent for those few months. And anyway, so telling my story and stuff like that, I don't know if it was intentional, but I was trying to spin everything away from me being a meth addict. So I would tell them about my drinking stories, you know, in group and stuff like that. And at one point, the counselor stopped me and was like, well, I'm not so concerned that you're addicted to meth. It doesn't seem like that's your drug of choice. But have you ever thought that you might be an alcoholic? Have you ever thought that sharing a 12-pack and a liter of Captain Morgan straight for your night of drinking with one other friend is a little much? And it's like, oh, no, I mean, that's a daily thing. And then we get up and we go do our stuff, like a bunch of complete functioning alcoholics. And so yeah, I was like, well, I'm cured. They said I'm not a meth addict. Great. And so I called up actually my drug dealer of all people
to let him know, hey, here's the good news. Turns out.
Yep, here's the good news. And the smoking shack is right out this door on this street. Come and get me at this time. And I bounced right out of treatment and went home, disappeared for a couple days, and, you know, just told my parents, nope, I'm done. this is what they said. And of course, failing to mention, oh yeah, that little tidbit about how they think that my drinking might be a problem, that type of drinking, the way that we're all drinking is alcoholically and abusive. Just didn't say anything. And within about a month, I was involuntarily committed to the treatment center here in town in Williston for a full 28 days. Because of course I went back and, did meth a couple times and just drinking, it was like, nope, cured, good after 2 weeks and right back in. So yeah, that was, I guess I've always considered it that one time I went to treatment, but it was over the course of probably 2 months total by the time I got out of the 28 days and, skipped out on that last 2 weeks of the first one. So, and then after that too, it was, it was just in my head, it was, well, I'm not addicted to meth, so this isn't a problem.
Right. And it's funny how, I'm sure you've seen this. I've seen, you're around long enough, you're around enough people drinking and using long enough, you see all the different types of justifications. And some of them might even be valid, but it's still, the reasons, the justifications. And well, I'm not a drug addict because I didn't use needles. Okay. I'm not that bad because everybody I use with is worse. I'm not that bad because I can stop. Well, can you stay stopped? I'm not that, or whatever it is, like whatever we figure out, I've only done it this many times as opposed to, there's just like this long list of ways that we kind of figure out how we're different from the people who have the problem because we so desperately don't want to be the people who have the problem. Right. And anything to not be that person. And, I remember going to treatment for the first time and them telling me blackouts weren't normal. Like normal drinkers didn't black out. I don't know if they told you that, but I vividly remember that. And I was astonished. I was like, there's no way that's not normal. Absolutely normal. It's like, that's a buzz. You're blacked out. That's just like what happens when you drink. No, that's not normal. And just so many things and just feeling like I was in an alternate universe, them telling you these things like that whatever XYZ behavior or whatever thought process and them telling you like normal people don't do that. And me thinking, I don't believe you. That's not possible. My behavior's not that abnormal. But then after there comes a point where you do go, oh Lord, my behavior is abnormal. like you do get there. But I just remember like the very early stages. I mean, I think especially if you're hanging out with the people that you talked about hanging out with, it's so easy to be like, I'm not doing what she's doing. I think I'm in good shape,
Yes, for sure. Well, and I always had the bar set so high because I had my dad as an example of what not to do. And then by the time I got to that point, 19, 20, 21 years old, my relationship with my parents was open. So I started hearing more stories of the things that my dad went through and him telling me those things, more of a cautionary tale, but he is always bigger, better, faster. So as well as being a cautionary tale, it was almost bragging,
It bumped your bar.
Yeah, really, really high because, oh, well, dad's an alcoholic drug addict, but I didn't do those crazy things that he went through and things like that. And it was crazy. And I was blackout drinking by that point in my life. And, it was probably actually only really a couple years into my drinking career. And I remember that the involuntary committal, my dad just had begged me and he had said, just think of this as a vacation. You're young.
The worst vacation.
Yeah. Worst vacation ever, just 30 days away from life. It's like, and now at 36 years old and 3 kids and a full-time
send
job
me away.
and all of that
send
stuff.
me
I'm
away.
just like, yeah, please institutionalize me.
Oh, 100%.
Like I will sleep the whole time. I don't care if I gain. I gain 40 pounds, eat whatever I want. Please take me away. But yeah, at 19, it was like, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about, Dad. But he was like, and the other thing you can do is they've got a lot of tools. And then later in life, if you do decide that you actually, really do have a problem, when you finally start believing it, then you'll have those tools and you'll have those resources. And I look back now and it's just hilarious because it just furthered my drinking career. It furthered me to enable myself because I had those tools. So as my drinking career progressed, I knew what to tell the people when I got a DUI and I had to do the evaluation to see if I had a drinking problem. I knew what to tell them because I knew what their standards were as far as what boxes to check of that I'm, a problem drinker. Plus I had my dad as an example of how to get out of everything or hide everything. Cause he's like practically genius level IQ, and in our family, the apple didn't fall far from the tree as far as that goes. But man, it was such a catalyst, knowing what to say to people, knowing how to hide. And it just ignited everything in me. Like, okay, I got this. I'm a professional now, which is so dumb. But I became a professional at weaving my story to make it sound good.
Stay tuned to hear more in just a moment.
Hello, everybody. This is Ashley Lowe Blassingame, the co-founder of Lionrock Recovery and your host. Lionrock Recovery has introduced a support meeting specifically for people struggling with anxiety related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Structured as an ongoing workshop, the COVID-19 anxiety support meeting will teach coping skills and be a place to share and connect with others also feeling the effects of this crisis. Everyone struggling with anxiety about COVID-19 is welcome. Let me repeat that. Everyone struggling with anxiety about COVID-19 is welcome. To view the meeting schedule and join a meeting in session, visit www.lionrockrecovery.com and click on the orange banner at the top of the page. You can't miss it. Together, we will learn to feel more centered and empowered in the face of this great challenge.
You said something that we in recovery often say, which is that my drinking career, right? I don't think normal people talk about their drinking career, right? It's not a career of they talk about their other endeavors, but we had a drinking career, right? It was a full-time professional activity that we did, which includes, but is not limited to, getting out of tricky situations, rehabs, conversations, super drunk that you have to, whatever it is, and we get expert level at it because you have to. If you're going to continue to do it, you either have to step it up in order to maintain that at that level, or you have to stop because there's no really great in between there. And then you at 21 had an experience that really escalated your drinking.
Yeah. So at 21, I actually met my boyfriend who lives with me now. We're raising my kids together. And he was from a town just a little bit north of town. And so to get out of, my problems and to get out of the crosshairs of my parents, I just latched onto him and he was mine and we were in love instantly. And looking back, it's kind of funny because he was fresh off a 2-year meth addiction. And so him drinking and us partying, it was just kind of an escape for him. And it was great because he wasn't on meth. And so he was happy. And I had the freedom because of my financial situation. Like I said, I had bought a house early and it was a big house and I wasn't living in it. So I was renting it. And so I had the cash flow to be able to just move and go up there and be with him. And so early in our relationship, we were up there and my best friend, actually I got a call asking me if I was okay. And I couldn't figure out, well, what do you mean? And what do you mean? Am I okay? And they're like, didn't you hear about what happened to Carmen? And I was just like so very confused.
And Carmen's your best friend. Carmen was
Carmen was my best friend. We grew up together, going to country school, and she was a grade lower than me in school. And then her mom was the cook at our school. And they were kind of a second set of parents to me and my sisters. And my mom and her mom, Karen, were best friends. And so they would have coffee every morning. And at our house, where the school bus was just like, 1 mile away, the pickup stop was at our house from school. And so she was over every day. And we just kind of grew up together. And her brother babysat us, and me and my sisters and her. And so when I get this call, I'm up in Crosby with my boyfriend, and it's that Carmen had murdered her mother. And it was completely unbelievable. So I'm calling frantically, their home phone, nobody's picking up. Back in the day of actual answering machines, I can't even imagine what that recording would sound like on the answering machine. Like, hey, it's just me, just checking in. I heard something really strange. Please, somebody call me back,
So you were like, that didn't happen.
Yeah. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I just was with her last weekend. We were supposed to get together, this day, which didn't happen because she was in Bismarck and all these different things. And come to find out, yeah, it did happen. And so immediately I drive back to Williston with, this boy that I'd been dating just a short amount of time, and find out it happened, went and talked to her family and everything like that. And it was just unbelievable.
What had happened?
And she apparently just snapped and stabbed her mom. And I don't even know how many times, but apparently multiple. And yeah, she murdered her mom. And
what do they know? Had that been a tumultuous relationship growing up, or did you have any idea that the two of them had problems? None.
No. I mean, Carmen, my friend, was obviously a part of my party group, our party group. We were friends with all the same friends, and her parents were on her butt all the time too, about getting her shit together and, either finishing school or getting a job or, whatever, just being an adult, because at that age we should have been doing, adult things and not just running around partying. And
was she smoking a lot of meth?
No, I actually never did any of that with her. And that was the weird part about it, is I was with that girl. I mean, probably 75% of my days up to that point, whether it was talking on the phone or, in this, like, my whole life. And I just couldn't see it. I mean, she had gotten in fights, which I had too. We're country kids. And so, I mean, and, her beating the crap out of some girl or something like that when they were at a party fighting. I mean, that was an unusual thing. I could not think of anything that would have done that. She had this new boyfriend, and the weekend before this happened, March 15th is when it happened. And beware the Ides of March. Oh my gosh, never forget that saying ever again. But I actually, the weekend before, was supposed to be hanging out with her, but she went with this boyfriend to Bismarck, which is a town a little bit southeast of us. And when I got into jail to see her, because I said that I was her cousin, so then I got face-to-face contact with her, because I wasn't going to go through glass. I just had to see my friend and had to ask her what the hell happened. I mean, that was my personality. I was scared to be in the jail, because more so than being around her.
Yeah.
And I made my mom come with me, and she was just kind of huddled in the back corner and just like crying. And she just still had like all these cuts on her fingers, and what I'm assuming are from knives, and, your hand slips. I listen to enough true crime that
right.
nowadays.
right. The blood spatter looked like it had been. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And, she went through this story, and it was face to face of, what happened. And supposedly they had gone to Bismarck, and they had done a bunch of drugs and a bunch of pills. And she remembers coming home to her parents' house, because she was living there at the time, and hiding in this little kind of cellar thing that they had. And she remembers hiding there for what she said was about a day. And my memory could be a little bit off on any of these timelines, and just thinking that she was, I think this story went something along the lines of, she was basically hallucinating, is what she says. And she thought she was pregnant, and that her mom was going to take the baby, and blah, 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 and this and that, like just this big, huge story. And I'm going, what? And at that time, what I had heard was that there was no drugs found in her system. But, looking back at the different timelines of when she would have been tested, when she would have done these drugs and stuff like that, they metabolize out of your system different, like PCP, you hear of people cutting in between their ribs because they can't breathe and they're going to make gills, or, crazy stuff like that.
Yeah.
So of course, searching for a reason, I'm looking for different drugs.
I'm searching for a reason this many years later. So.
Yep, exactly. And so she tells this story and it was really crazy. It was believable to me because when she goes through the story of her reasoning and she's crying through this whole entire thing, just like shaking, like she almost doesn't dare get near me. It's like, she's almost afraid to come near me. And I suppose you would be almost, I don't know. I just wanted to grab her and hug her because I could never believe that person, the person that I knew, the person that was my best friend would ever be capable of doing that. And she'd tell her story and then she'd like backtrack. But then the story would be the same as she went forward. And then she'd backtrack again. And then the story would be the same. No matter if she backtracked and went forward in her timeline of events, it was always the same. So it seemed really believable to me that, there was something that snapped in her brain. But so I went up to visit her a few times. Her family was like my family, and they were kind of really against that. I felt really strange going up there and almost like being there for her, but then also being so mad and angry that something like that could happen. Because how do you deal with being friends with a murderer? And it's how do you, at 21 years old, that would have been the year I turned 21. How does that even register? And when you don't fully understand why, there was no reason that we could pinpoint that it happened other than a psychological snap. And I was never afraid of her. I remember being at a party on New Year's Eve at her house, and I was riding my snowmobile. That's what I was driving that night. Because you're going to go get drunk at a party, you better drive your snowmobile because you don't want to drive your car.
Right. That makes sense to me.
Kind of like that saying, well, I had to drive. I was too drunk to walk.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So anyway, she didn't want me to get hurt driving home. And we ended up getting in a fight, and she pushed me and my head went through a glass window in her house. And gosh, her mom was so mad at us because we broke out the window. But she literally got in a physical fight with me because she didn't want me to drink and drive my snowmobile home because I might get hurt. And so, when the cops interviewed me later and stuff like that, I never had to go to court or go on I'm sure I was on the record, but have a formal interview because I really didn't have anything bad to say that I could pinpoint, as far as convicting her of this murder. And so, after that, I had a really good excuse to be escaping for everyone. My parents were empathetic that I'd lost my best friend. They were sad because they lost some of their best friends. They lost a person that was like a daughter to them. I was losing friends over the fact that, I had some contact with her after the fact and being judged because of that. And if anybody hears this, the people that don't know probably will judge me because I've had contact with her. And it was about caring about her as a person, but also just me not understanding how something like that could happen and wanting to find answers. I try to figure things out. I like answers.
Yeah. That's to me, like, I don't know, maybe other people have judgment. I have zero judgment about that. Like, someone your whole life as this one person, they snap and do something that is inexplicable and that you weren't there for any of that. And you're supposed to erase a lifetime of relationship. What happens to her, particularly I take it she's in jail, in prison.
Yep, she is. It happened. So over the course of a year, she was in the county jail here. And then I'm not exactly sure how the agreement was reached, but I think she pled guilty in turn for a deal. And I think she got 15 years. So she's 13 years into a 15-year sentence. She was eligible November of 2019 for early release for good behavior. But apparently the victims, which would have been her brother, her brother's wife, probably some of her aunts and uncles and cousins, I think they went and testified against an early release. With getting only 15 years for murder, I can totally see their point. I'm sure it was devastating to her because she had gotten emails from her over the course of this 13 years and stuff like that. And I just told her that I don't know how to feel about it. I don't know if, there's ever any sort of relationship that we could necessarily have. But, if anything that I want out of the relationship, she said that, she would talk to me and explain things to me. So maybe I could have some understanding. And I don't know how I feel about that, but it's just some of those things. Yeah, I feel like there's chapters in my life I need to close. And that's one that's never been closed. And it really did turn me into a downward spiral. And so with that excuse of, I'm going through a lot, and people constantly asking, all of our friends, which were mutual friends, would always be asking, like, what happened? Or did you hear anything? And blah, 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 blah. So a lot of my drinking from then on out was hiding. My parents at the same time were divorcing. My sisters were leaving for college and stuff like that. So they were getting away. So that really wasn't an issue with, my parents getting divorced and my sisters having to see anything. I was kind of always the protector and, the little mama and the two little ducklings following along.
I'm the oldest of three girls, so I get it.
Yep. And whether you have to take on that role, I think it just kind of
happens
with age, you just kind of do it. And so everything was kind of falling apart. And then Michael, my boyfriend at the time, he was up in Crosby, which was close to my family. It's just an hour away. And so we just hid together. He was drinking, but not using meth. Nobody really knew that at the time from him. And so we got a house and he went to work and I went to work sometimes, and partied. It was an even smaller town. It was a town of about 800. So, that was the only thing to really do was go to the bar. That's where everybody our age that was there. So we continued in that pattern for about 5 years. And as much as we, loved each other and wanted to have a life, we could say what we wanted out of life and what we were going to do, but we weren't making any positive steps towards that. You just get in the holding pattern of every single day doing the same exact thing, go to work, come home, go to the bar, go to work, come home, go to the bar, go to work, come home, go to the bar. And that's what we did. And I knew something had to change, but I didn't know how to change it. And so we got out of that relationship because we fought a lot after we were drinking. Mostly me, I was going through so much and he was my sounding board. It wasn't necessarily anything he was doing, but, unresolved parental issues. And during my parents' divorce, I think their divorce lasted 2 years, we learned a lot more about my dad's addiction. And our parents, with us, me and my sisters being adults, they got to the point where they didn't shield us from anything anymore. And my mom wanted to, even though she didn't have to justify her reasons for leaving him because he just would never be sober. And my sisters and I didn't need that. But, we learned a lot of stories from her about when we were little and, things like, oh, yeah, you all three got your tonsils out. He drank all your bottles of codeine. So then I was sitting there with 3 kids with no medication with their tonsils ripped out. And it was 70 below wind chill. And your dad filled it back up with water. But that's how bad his addiction was. It was no big deal to drink our codeine cough syrup. And all of it at once, because what kind of buzz are you going to get from codeine cough syrup? Children's codeine cough syrup. So then we had this whole new light shed on my dad too at the same time. And they were fighting. And then of course, my dad is trying to look at it, or trying to justify himself and the love that he didn't receive from my mom because she was all shut off to their relationship and she had made her mind up a long time ago. And it was just this back and forth of almost whose side we were on. And, divorce is horrible at any age, I feel like, but as adults, it was just mind blowing to hear all of these things that were going on in our childhood that we thought for the most part was super, super happy. And everybody loved each other. And it was there was all this hate and resentment coming up and just so many unknowns. And then dad would tell stories about mom and mom would tell stories about dad. And, it's just this constant battle between them. And so then that really made me feel bad because I didn't know what my family was anymore. And they were always so loving growing up, even our extended family and stuff like that. And it all kind of just seemed like this big lie, this big cover up. And a lot of the covering up when we were growing up, I get it. My mom wanted to shelter us because children don't understand,
right?
Everything that's going on. So all that was going on. So, that was horrible. That was a 2-year battle. And then, Michael and I are just doing the same thing. And so nobody really paid attention, I don't think, to what I was doing, even though I got DUIs, which I was really good at hiding those for some reason. And probably because it's rural enough out here that I just drove around. Oh, no license for 2 years because I blew .21. shoot, that's not that bad. And I'll just drive. I just won't get caught, and I never did. And so I could hide that. And in my search for some sort of like stability, I think I kind of turned to just finding it in other people. I got a new boyfriend, and that would last a couple years. And then it was another boyfriend that would last a couple years. And the pattern it kept repeating. And I probably had some sort of addiction to love, or it was codependent. I mean, we grew up in that, coming from an alcoholic family. So yeah. And it was funny because it was just like, I wanted to do things for myself. I had a picture of the life that I wanted to do. I was smart enough to attain it, but I just couldn't make the steps myself to get there. So it all changed, or started changing, when I had my kids. And that would have been, 2010, I found out I was pregnant with my son. And I was in a relationship with my son's dad. We'd been in a relationship for over a year. We'd moved to Alaska because, again, everything's going to change in geography. When your geography changes.
Yeah, you're a different person.
Yep, exactly. So finally, I was sober for the first time in, 10 years. Because, I would have been, I was 28. So it would have been, so the first time in about 10 years, I was sober. And it wasn't a problem for me, thankfully. But, I found new addictions like Mountain Dew, which added about 60 pounds to my poor body. And we were just up in Alaska. I was isolated. I was away from everything. And then he was a different religion than I was. And he would find ways to isolate me even more, and just got really controlling, trying to use his like religion against me. Like, I had one friend that flew over to Anchorage, and he was there and he needed a ride. So he's just waiting at my apartment. And my boyfriend at the time, I'm 6 months pregnant. He says to me after my friend had left, like, it's completely inappropriate. You basically are cheating on me. You're an unmarried woman with an unmarried man in an apartment by yourselves. Like, what is wrong with you? And from that point on, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to get out of this. There were obviously other things, but I'm like, he's like literally grasping at straws to like try to control me, and I'm not even doing anything wrong. And so I started making plans of like, if I stay, what are we going to do? And if I leave, how am I going to get there? And being in Alaska away from all my family and pregnant, it was like, okay, what do I do? So I stayed until my son was born. Tried to work everything out with him. Like, he really wasn't working at the time, and going to Alaska, that was the plan. He was going to go work with his brother who lived up there, and I would find a job, which I did. I worked at a golf course. When I was up there, I was just like, I don't really want to do anything professional right now. I just want to chill out. I've worked hard my whole life, and I'm just kind of going to chill, but I need to have something to do. And it was really, really fun, but he never got a job. And this was also one of my biggest downfalls in picking a partner, how I don't see these patterns, or how I didn't during that like 15 years from when I started dating until now. I always fell in love with the idea of what this man could be.
Their potential.
Yep. And maybe that's a daddy issue because my dad is so full of wasted potential. And that's just what it boiled down to with the father of my son. And so after my son was born, I moved back to Williston. And at that time, the oil boom was going really strong. And I had told him, we have a son, and if you don't want to work, that's fine. You want to do daddy daycare, that's fine. But if I'm going to be the one that's working, because this child is not going to survive on love. As much as you want me to breastfeed till he's 18 so we can save money, it's just not going to work for me. So we're going home and I get to pick where I'm going to work if I'm going to be the breadwinner, which once we got home, he of course went back to work. He still actually works for me. But my son was 6 months old and I finally called it quits with him. And during those 6 months, I really wasn't drinking. I was breastfeeding off and on and stuff like that. And, I feel like in a drinking career, and when you finally realize that you're drinking alcoholically and you look back, the excuses become so much more apparent. They say, well, you always have an excuse. It's like, this person died. My cat died. I had pneumonia, so I should drink myself stupid instead of taking antibiotics, anything. And so, yeah, I mean, during those 6 months, I did have excuses to drink, or I'm stressed because now I'm a new mom and I deserve to have 3 bottles of wine if I want to. And he was drinking right along with me. And in his religion, he was LDS Mormon. So for him, I think it was a personal problem. He was flip-flopping back and forth between what he was raised in for 40 years and what he actually was doing with his life. Because it's not like I started him on drinking. I mean, he was always did a little partying here and there. So he was struggling personally too. And so we just parted ways. And little did I know, when we parted ways, I got a going away present, which would be 9 months later, my daughter. And so shortly after I left him and moved out and took my son with me, he was actually still working for us, which was fine. And so we saw each other daily. We got to raise our son, side by side, but not be together. And I didn't even tell him. I think it was 6 or 7 months along when I finally couldn't hide it anymore that I was pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
His daughter. So yeah, that story with the priest, I'm Catholic. So when I got him baptized, he's like, well, are you with the father? And it's like, I'm married Catholic mother. Can I please baptize my children? And like, oh no, that one was a going away present, Mr. Priest. Yeah, that's a whole nother story. He's like, oh, did you really just say that to me? Actually, when I had that conversation, my mom was in the room and she just looked at me like, Kerry, stop. I know you get nervous and I know you ramble, but come on. You're smarter than that.
No jokes. Oh my God.
Just like slapping her head.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, well, it's the truth.
Oh boy, that's hysterical.
Yep. So, but I didn't tell him, not because I didn't want him to be a part of our daughter's life. I was actually really excited because if we were going to be apart, then my kids wouldn't be alone in this. They wouldn't be bouncing from house to house, in the long run. I just thought that was a nice thing that they could go together. They could have each other. Just because we screwed up as far as our relationship goes, our kids wouldn't be alone in that. So yeah, we were both really happy about it. And of course, he went through the whole, oh my gosh, it's not mine, blah, 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 blah. The abuse of, trying to be just, I don't know, make me feel bad about myself. And, oh, it must just be a lie. And, I guess I can see that. But at the same time, I mean, what was he going to do? Hold my hand while I was pregnant for 9 months? I just didn't see any need to have to fight about what I was doing while I was pregnant again and not being apart. And I didn't want to get drawn back in. And so I had her in November. I started having contractions and I was staying with my mom because I knew that I might go into labor. And so I left her house at, 1 a.m. and I had to pull over like 5 times in between the hospital having contractions, and showed up at the hospital. And by the next morning I had a baby and cleaned up, was walking around the hospital. And the nurses were like trying to tell me, your sister's in this room. I'm like, no, that's my room. They're like, what are you doing?
Oh my gosh.
Do you want to call somebody to be up here with you? Because nobody was up there, you know. I was just always very self-sufficient. And so, then that started our journey with 2 kids. And we co-parented very well together, but we both went back to drinking. And, we were taking the kids every other weekend. And like I said, he was working for us. So then it was at my work, which is so strange, probably as far as getting sober. My desk at work is a bar, like a fully stocked bar. I think I said earlier, my grandpa owned a liquor store. Well, at our sign shop now, it's all decorated with the signs, but they're all liquor signs. And then my uncles and some of their friends and my grandpa's old friends, they used to come down for happy hour. Well, the tradition has continued. And now they've got a bar. One of our friends died and he had this bar in his house. And so they dropped this bar off at our shop. And so every day at 4, they come down and watch Jeopardy, and 4:35 have a beer or 2. And so when I had my kids, that's where the pattern began again. It was basically 2 years of not drinking and then binge drinking in between when I wasn't pregnant. And I was an adult now. I had my own family, and so have a couple drinks after work before I had to go home with the kids. And it just went right back into it, except for it was new. I was by myself other than my kids. And, I was normal drinking again because that's what everybody did. That was happy hour.
Right. So now it looked normal.
Yep. So I got back into that pattern and, of course, found another boy, a boy that I'd known my whole life. And we were going to make a life together. And he knew my kids. He knew me. He'd always loved me and got married and, had another baby. And our whole dating and then up till I got pregnant with my youngest daughter. I mean, it was just a big party. Because then I had somebody there. So I had a backup. So I could drink as much as I wanted because I had somebody else staying there. And, it was two people with their eyes on the kids. And they were babies. They slept. That's, they didn't know anything. And so I had my daughter in June of 2015. And by January of 2016 is when I got sober. Because just in those 6 months from June to January, the couple times that I drank, I mean, it was just awful. I don't know if something chemically changed in my body or my tolerance had just gotten so high that it went backwards. Like they say, it happens to some people. But I mean, 2 bottles of wine is a lot, I'm sure, for some people. But for me, I mean, it was face first,
wow,
through glass windows and getting 90 stitches in my face.
You got 90 stitches in your face?
Yeah.
I can't see that at all.
Yeah, no, it was in my nose, right here, and then right here. And then under my eye. I'm lucky I didn't lose my eye. That was probably after a bottle of wine. I mean, I wasn't even wasted at all, but just drinking, slipped, went through a wall, a glass plated wall. And even that didn't slow me down though. I mean, it was, I slipped and I put my hand and there was a table runner. I mean, even that wasn't a problem. And it was funny because I was staying with my mom. It happened at her house and my kids were there. So I, called the ambulance myself. Even a pillow on my face would not stop the bleeding. Like I was taking selfies of myself to try to see if I could stop the bleeding and where the cuts in my face were. I didn't even know if I still had an eye on the one side, and came home just zipper faced. And it's, my family is calling me is enough? Is enough? We realize you weren't that drunk, but still, is enough? And I'm all embarrassed thinking people are going to think I was wasted. And it's to me, I wasn't super wasted.
Yeah. You're I had a bottle of wine.
Yeah. I wasn't blackout drunk. And
because you're comparing it to what you've normally drink or what you've drank before. And we do that, right? Where we compare, we say this XYZ thing happened. I fell through a window, but I had only had a bottle of wine. I used to drink, or I have drank, a liter before and I was fine. So it's not about, we're just comparing the intake of alcohol to, the situation, and by those rules, it's not that big of a deal.
No, absolutely not. And for me too, it was telling my sister, which my sister at that time, my little sister, she had been sober for probably 3 years at that point, maybe 2. So she had gone through her own stuff with drinking and really bad depression and stuff. And at that point in my life and my drinking too, it's just from her sober mind, and a lot of my family wasn't sober. So, they could almost justify it too. Oh, you only had a bottle of wine. What the heck happened? That's not like you. That's not like you. We drank 7 bottles of wine between the 3 of us and we were all fine, So yeah, I mean, that didn't even stop me. And I knew it was bad, but at the same time, not bad enough because my standards were so much higher.
What made it bad enough? What made you make and how did you make a decision to get?
Well, I was married at the time to my husband, Mark, and we've since divorced, but he was over it. It was scaring him. And for him to be scared, considering, he's had an up and down past with drinking, but he can have 2 beers and quit, and he doesn't care. I mean, not that he doesn't drink like the rest of us and party like the rest of us in growing up where we've grown up. I was scaring him too. I was at the point where they were going to commit me. I got drunk within 1 week, got a DUI, said I was done drinking, and it was just, a horrible mistake as always. And then went out a week later and ended up in the drunk tank in detox in the jail because I didn't really understand what the cop was trying to do, even though he was just trying to tell me hey, it's winter, I'll give you a ride home. But it's he had to take me into detox because I wouldn't tell him where I lived. And I literally was 2 blocks away from my house.
Oh my gosh.
And so then after that, nobody knew where I was. And I had my kids, and I couldn't do that to them anymore. The thought of them seeing some of the things that I had seen with my dad at that point, because during this whole period after my parents got divorced up until I quit drinking, my dad spiraled out of control. He went from, his drug of choice, opiates, he went to heroin because it was less money, and you couldn't, now they've since cracked down on prescription drugs. So I think that was just his next stepping stone. I'm not necessarily up to date on how that all works.
Yeah.
For opiate addicts. But so that's what happened to him. So I saw a lot as an adult from him and having to commit him, because once my mom was divorced, she was done. She'd done her job. She couldn't save him. Well, my sisters and I, even though it wasn't our job necessarily either, we took on that role. And thinking about my kids having to see what I've seen of my dad in that state, it was done. Enough is enough. And I wasn't going to be forced into anything. I wasn't going to let my parents, my husband, my friends, anybody, my sisters, I wasn't going to let them send me away for 30 days away from my kids. Like, there had to be a way. So I got out of jail, and they talked to me, and my marriage was falling apart at the time too. Not all because of drinking. Of course, that played a role in it too. But, just a different adulting things between me and my husband, as far as like making money, supporting the kids,
all the things that take a marriage apart.
Yep. Paying bills and how we should do it, and retirements. And, we just couldn't come up with a good schedule. And we just couldn't come together on it. And so knowing that everything was just going to fall apart, I could read the writing on the wall. And I told my husband, I told my sisters and my mom, like, I will figure it out. I will get help. Don't commit me. Just let me do some research. I'll figure it out. And I told my husband, I'll quit drinking. I don't have a problem with that, but I'm just going to tell you right now, that's not going to fix our marriage. So we'll take that out of the picture for all of you. I promise you guys. And I know that I can't make excuses anymore, but I can show you. I can stop drinking, and I can show you that I will do what I say I'm going to do. And I was driving around, and I'm one of the very few smoking unicorns left out there, and smoking cigarettes and Googling on my phone. And I ended up in the parking lot of Walmart, and I had come across this online treatment center, which is Lionrock. And I called, and it was Bayhan. Is that how you say her name?
Bayan. Yeah.
Bayan. She was at the other end of the line. And I'm, thinking about it now, kind of, it's like, I'm surprised I wasn't a sobbing mess. Maybe I was, and I don't remember it, because I feel like I should have been. And, knowing that now how it changed my life, I mean, I should have been sobbing some happy tears. Like, here it is. This is what I've been looking for. The pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Williston, the town that I was living in and still am in, doesn't have a lot of resources. There's been times where there's been treatment centers there. There's been counselors here, good counseling services and stuff like that. But it's pretty hit or miss, and there's not a lot of funding. And so to find something online, because at the time in 2016, there wasn't anything here that I could do from my home, was amazing. And so when I called, she said, I'll get right back to you. It'll probably, maybe she heard the desperation in my voice, or maybe it's just standard within your company. But she told me, I'll get back to you within 2 to 3 hours. Give me your insurance, which I had at the time, and let me see what we can do. And she called back, and she's like, oh, yep, you're in. And this is going to be what you have to cover, but all of this. And I'm like, you're kidding. When does this start? And so then I think I started the next week, and continued, and haven't drank since. Haven't even really thought about it. It wasn't even hard, which is really amazing after all those years that it wasn't hard for me. And I was still going to work and sitting on my bar stool and having people come in for happy hour every day at 4 and kick me off my desk, my bar, AKA desk, and standing there for happy hour, not drinking. And, every day having to say, nope, I don't want one, and it was easy to say no because I have kids, I always had excuses to say no.
Right. So it was easy to come up with reasons. But I mean, what did you get from that experience? What did you get that really changed your ability to deal with the things that you had been running from?
I just finally realized, I guess, that it was okay to have problems. I know I always made my problems to myself seem really little because, there's always people that have worse problems. There's always people that, just can't do it. You get through it every day. So it's okay. You're surviving. That's okay. I wasn't living, but I was surviving. And that was just okay. I just didn't have the drive to reach for more. I don't know if I didn't think I was deserving or if there was just so much going on because of codependence issues that I distracted myself, putting out all the other fires in everybody else's lives and just it took the spotlight off of me. So it was a double-edged sword. And so when I finally knew there was help, and any help that I had received before, I guess it was kind of always people that were like me. And the thing about Lionrock that was so different is the people that I was connecting with were from all over the world. There was people on the East Coast. There was people, over in Hawaii that were getting up at 4 a.m., to make these meetings that we were in, these group sessions that we were in. And they did all sorts of things, the lawyers and, farmers and, very successful people on, on the paper scale,
Yeah. Right. And, resume on paper. Yeah.
And it was just like, oh my gosh, wow. Because everybody always told me my whole life that I could do anything, that I could be anything, that I was so smart, I can always figure it out. And everybody always did call and rely on me, from friends to family to anything. And it for little projects and for hard things. And I'd always figure it out. So to see that there was other people that were struggling, that were high functioning, that weren't, I don't know, in the gutter. And, you do realize in the program and things like that, we are all the same, but I wasn't that person. And it just coming to terms with, but you are, you're that bloody person with 90 stitches in your face. You're that person that face planted and has a black eye. That's, it's you are that person, but two things can be true at the same time. You can be that person, you can be that addict, but you can be successful and functioning and happy and have love. That was just interesting to have to see people that were not from my community that were doing that, for me to realize it's okay.
Do you have relationships with any of those people?
I follow a few on Facebook, and the ones that were in my program for the longest, they seem to be doing really good. There's this other girl, I doubt that she would care if I mentioned her name, but her name is Sheila, and she is on the East Coast, and she's running a foundation for recovery and does a lot of work and stuff like that. And it's funny because, as people and accepting people, we want to say that we don't judge. But when I first met Sheila in our program, it was like, oh, that girl's not going to make it.
Totally.
And just like, this East Side Jersey type accent, knows everything, and she's just beautiful and she's just outspoken and stuff like that. And it's so funny because it's like, she's making it, and she's overcome so many mountains, and it's so awesome to see that. And she's very out there. I don't tell my story. I actually had a friend Snapchat me last night and say, I heard you've been a good girl. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I always kind of am. And this is one of my oldest friends that used to like come out to my house and do my parents' dishes so that I could go out and go drag Maine in town with him. Like we never, because that was my chore before I got to leave. And he said, no, I heard you quit drinking. I was like, oh my gosh, like that was like 4.5 years ago that I quit drinking. He's like, oh my gosh, good for you.
Yeah. Like it's not, what does your life look like today? And how has sobriety changed your life?
Everything is still a complete show.
I love it.
But that boy that back in the day from Crosby that I dated for about 5 years, after my marriage broke up, he actually ended up coming back to town. We'd always kept in touch and everything. And so he knew my life. I knew his life. He did go back to drugs. He's in recovery now. And so about a year after I filed for divorce and everything, he asked me out on a date. And so we went out on a date, and now we've been together for almost 2 years now. And by the time that we got back together, like we were both sober. And so we had really honest discussions of like not falling back into old patterns and just like getting into that point of like, oh, back when we really loved each other 10 years ago or 8 years ago. And he was all right with me having 3 kids and him having to deal with 2 exes. And so we decided to try it out. And now he didn't not know. Back when we first dated, we had this dog that we got, and she's horrible. And she's a German short hair, and she's never calmed down. She's the worst one of all of our kids. Like if there was anything to prep of having wild kids, this dog was it. I mean, she's still to this day, she's 13 years old. She pulls out like the whole cupboard that the garbage can is in and will tip it over and somehow figure out the child's safety locks and get the garbage out every single day.
Oh yeah, they're really smart.
So smart. And so throughout the years, 13 years of this dog's life, even when we were broken up, I always watched the dog. She's a hunting dog. I like to hunt. He would rather shoot a camera and like thinks she's very pretty and will shoot the camera. I shoot the birds. And so he knew my family. He knew my kids. You know, he knew my ex-husband, and we'd maintained a friendship. So yeah, now we're just raising the kids together and doing recovery together. Our recovery is pretty personal. We don't do a lot of things together, but we talk about it a lot. You know, where are you at? And where are you at? And it wasn't something that I guess that we went through together. So it's kind of, we bring something to each other's sobriety in different ways. And so it works well for us. And it's just no pressure. I feel like we both got really lucky in sobriety in that way. We don't right now, and it could change. We're just so comfortable in it. And it's really nice. And the kids they're insane. They're insane. I love my kids more than anything in the world. But if there was ever a hard job, it is that. Like with everything going on right now and having to consider homeschooling and being a stay-at-home mom type of thing and all of that, it's like, no, never been my dream. Never in my life been my dream. And now I'm being forced into it. And it has been pretty insane.
It's been, you're talking about the coronavirus and the pandemic that we're talking about and kids staying home. And I have a lot of friends who are in recovery, particularly mothers, who this is testing us at a level. I mean, I'm sure that it's testing everyone. So I don't mean to say that, only alcoholics, but to those of us in recovery feeling like there's an out or there's a release or they're, desperately needing that, it has been really difficult for many people. And, what's great is that you had the experience of seeking support online. So that's not new, that's not a new concept to you, but I do know a lot of people, this is it's a brand new concept to them. And there's that transition time. And it's not, I think that's kind of what recovery is. So much of the time is like life on life's terms and suiting up and showing up to what is happening, not what I've decided I want to happen, what I've decided needs to happen. All the different aspects of it is just really, because that's what I needed alcohol for, was to deal with the fact that life was not going the way that I had anticipated or planned or wanted or whatever. I needed alcohol for that. And so now I need the tools of recovery and the community and the different things in order to deal with that same problem. Turns out life still does not go exactly as I plan. This is case in point, but yeah, it's been a wild time.
Yes, it very, very true. When I had originally reached out and I guess how I did that is I found the podcast, and I'm really into listening to podcasts at work. And I am not the one to put my face on anything, especially anything having to do with, hi, I'm Kerry, I'm an alcoholic. Labels just have really not been my thing. I mean, it's funny how hi, I'm Kerry, I'm an alcoholic versus, hi, I'm Kerry, I've abused alcohol in my past. You know, one makes me feel a little uneasy and one makes me feel like, you know, oh, that's kind of okay.
Well, so a person in long-time recovery. I'm a person in long-time recovery. That's a new one that people are using.
Yes. And well, that was one of the reasons that I reached out to Lionrock. And then the more I thought about it, you know, I really, you know, with a lot of my codependence, a lot of my family issues and stuff, I was worried about doing an interview about my story because I don't want to call out anybody specifically, because there's a lot of people in my family and that are really close to me that could use time to work on themselves. A lot of people that I currently work with and have relationships with, and a lot of those are family members
whose names start with B and end with rad.
Right. And so I was worried about that because I just didn't want to, I didn't want them to maybe hear this and think that I was pointing fingers at anybody. Because, you know, any sort of recovery, any sort of mental health issues, you know, you have to a lot of times come around and accept that part of you on your own. And then I just finally, I had to get over myself for a minute. I've kind of been hiding my sobriety and embarrassed of my sobriety for so long. And it's kind of becoming a movement. And I can't say that I will ever be the face of a whole lot of things, you know, but I do want people to realize that there's so many different ways. Lionrock, I mean, anybody that I've seen struggling, I send them the link, you know, it's just such a resource. When I talk to my counselor and stuff like that, you know, there's just so many things that I found valuable from my experience. And, you know, she had to reassure me, you know, it's okay. You know, your story is your story and what you get out of it. And I did just want to share that and have people know that there are resources. And, you know, if you want to hide and do it, you don't have to be that person that's on Facebook, you know, counting your days down for all your friends. And if that's your way, cool.
Yeah.
If that's what gives you the courage to change, or if that's what gives you the pat on the back to keep going, fine. Me, I was so embarrassed of myself that I just never wanted to let go of that control and have to break myself down to that I was that person. And I am that person. And I think everybody is really that person in one way or another, whether it's drugs, alcohol, whether they're, you know, whether they're a bad partner, whether they're a bad employee, whether they just, you know, whether they just can't get off the couch because, you know, they're depressed and, you know, all those different things. And so, yeah, that's just why I just decided it was probably time, because it is becoming more and more apparent, and it does help people to hear other people's stories, whether or not, you know, it's the little things or whether they've done humongous things. It's everybody in between. It really is. It's kind of like the coronavirus right now. It doesn't discriminate.
Right. I know. It doesn't discriminate. Exactly. Yeah. It was so cool to get your email and feedback about, you know, listening and that, you know, the episodes and hearing other people's stories had helped you, and you get to do that too. You know, you get to add something back to the pod. And of course it's always funny to me because people are scared to share their story. And then I'm like, okay, well, if you come on, it's a global podcast. Like, it's a global podcast. So it's definitely alcoholic to go from 0 to 60, but I support it entirely.
Yes, it is. And, you know, that is so much of my life. I've gone back and forth. My sister, that she writes songs and stuff, and she's got a couple albums and everything. And she's the writer in the family, and that's what she went into in college and everything. But we've usually let her stick with the writing and everything like that, and the speaking and the performing and all of that. But we always laugh because in a combination of all of our stories, and then especially a lot of mine with being in Williston and dealing with my dad and having firsthand stories of still a practicing alcoholic, not a functioning, but he's sure still practicing.
He's practicing so much, he's gotten really good at it.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I think we might be on the downward slide.
Oh,
but
no.
Yeah. But anyway, we've been just like talking about like, gosh, one of us has to write a book. And so I've kind of started to do that too. And it's coming on here too. That was like another thing. It's like, I need to find a community. You know, I'm following this community, but you know, it's one thing to watch, but you got to put in a little effort too.
And that's so part scary, of recovery. Though.
It is.
I'll tell you, for me, which might sound ridiculous given I now tell bits and pieces of my story in like 60 episodes, but I was terrified to do this. I resisted it. And then once I agreed to it, I wasn't sure that I was going to have anything with my face on it. And then we had 25, our producer, Christiana, was going to kill me. We had 25 images that we were going to use for the artwork. And there's all this debate about which one to use. And they had originally mocked up the one that we ended up using. And I was like, no, we're not doing that. I don't want my face. I don't want people to be able to search me and see this, that. And at the 11th hour, I was like, oh, I don't care. Fine, whatever. Just use it, and they scrapped like the 20 other images and just put my face on it. I was like, oh, here we go. I just remember hitting like, oh my, and seeing it download in China and seeing it download in France and going, oh my God, what have I done? But, and then I get emails from people like you who tell me that it's helped them in some way, shape, or form, and that people's stories have helped them, that Lionrock has helped them. And I'm like, whatever. Like, it comes down to that. Like, are you going to judge me for getting better? Is that what I'm afraid of? That someone's going to say, wow, you did all those things and you got better. What a bad person you are.
Exactly.
Like, what do I have to do on this planet to be absolved from, the crimes and misgivings of my past, right? Have I not done enough at this point? And I feel like I have.
Yes. Well, you guys definitely have amazing stories, and your story was amazing. And it's just really, really fun to see a community that is so well-rounded too. I mean, that's one of the most important things that I need to remind myself, and everybody should, and the acceptance among our group is beyond anything that you'll really ever experience. And there's just nothing like it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. Kerry, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it and think that you are wonderful, and look forward to your book and your story. And when you finish the book,
yes,
please call us and we'd love to hear more about it. We'll come talk about it.
Well, if nothing else, it should be pretty funny. I just had said something on my personal Facebook, about the first step for homeschooling is 80s and 90s dance moves class. Mm-hmm. And if nothing else, it'll be so hilarious that we'll get an ab workout. So,
there you go.
If nothing else, we'll fall back on that.
Exactly.
So, and I sure appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to me. And I hope, it reaches whoever it needs to reach, and
it will,
that it helps.
Yeah, it absolutely will. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, you have a great day.
You
Talk
too.
soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
This podcast is sponsored by Lionrock Recovery. Lionrock provides online substance abuse counseling where clients can get help from the privacy of their own home. They are accredited by the Joint Commission, and sessions are private, affordable, and user-friendly. Call their free helpline at 800-258-6550 or visit www.lionrockrecovery.com for more information.